cast, broadcast, whichever way we want to call it. Since Matt Chin isn't here, we can't do any sexy Grumblecast voices. But today we're going to discuss the NFL Wild Card round of the playoffs. We're going to go ahead and start with Saturday games, and the Panthers defeating the Cardinals 27-16, and we'll go ahead and start with Taco. I'm going to go ahead and bring you in. Talking about this game, a lot of people didn't think the Panthers should have even been in the playoffs. Actually, no one from the NFC South probably should have made the playoffs, but they do make it, and they're hosting Arizona Cardinals. What do you think the keys to success were for the Carolina Panthers in this game, Taco?
I think one of the big things was overall that the Carolina Panthers defense really showed up and actually did something. Yeah, Cam Newton, the offense was there. Obviously, when you're dealing with a fourth-string quarterback and Lindley, it's really not that hard to do anything, but still, Panthers defense at least had to show up, and at least they did. They took the field, 11 men on the field. That's pretty much all they had to do, but at least they showed some life that, yeah, they're, double-digit underdogs already to Seattle next week, but I think their defense showed us something that at least it was more than what we could have expected out of the Panthers, in my opinion.
And, when you think of the Panthers last year, it was a lot about that stingy defense, how great that defense was. And Ron Rivera's defense this year has hardly been a shell of itself of last year. But Cam Newton getting a running game back this week. And Banks, talk a little bit for a second about how important it was for Cam Newton and Ron Rivera's Carolina Panthers to have a healthy and productive Jonathan Stewart.
Well, that was the key, I think. You did get D'Angelo Williams back as well. I think he had one run that was significant. But just having the threat back there was key for him. And then you also have Tolbert coming in there, also Whitaker. I think the full complement of those four guys really kept Arizona honest, on the defensive end. That and having themselves pinned up against the wall offensively, that was kind of the dagger for them. But I really think having the full load with the four guys in the backfield really helped them. Not to mention Cam Newton, running at will when he wants to. So.
And you mentioned Arizona, and we haven't really touched much on Arizona since they did lose. But Dermer, hopefully you can hear me this time. We've been going back and forth a little bit, but let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals for a second. And what do you take away from this Bruce Arians team who, we'll talk about the Bengals in a little bit, and a lot of the talk in Cincinnati has been injuries. But you haven't heard Bruce Arians or anybody in the Arizona locker room talk at all about the major injuries that the Cardinals faced this year. What do you take away from the effort that Bruce Arians' Arizona Cardinals put together against Cam Newton's Carolina Panthers? Anything from Dermer? Nothing? Going once? And
okay.
Here we go.
I got some. Okay.
Like a 7-second delay.
All right, sorry about that.
Is he overseas?
Yeah, it really is. Obviously, it was all for Palmer to get injured right after he signed that $50 million contract, but really just hard to win. I heard say he could win a Super Bowl with Drew Stanton, but then he goes down, and I know he's not making excuses. I was just wondering why Thomas wasn't given some type of. And another thing was Andre Ellington. This was really the year he was supposed to go off, and without him in the backfield, they were some of their active string guys and people that we never even heard of before, and it was really unfortunate. But Arians for a while was looking for Coach of the Year there.
And that's Arians has been the leader in the clubhouse for me with Jim Caldwell in my list for Coach of the Year, and you brought up Ellington and that running game for Arizona, and Taco bringing you back in. How important is it not just for this past game, but looking forward for the Arizona Cardinals? You get Palmer back, assuming he'll be your starting quarterback. How important is it for Arians' offense to have a running game to complement Carson Palmer?
I think that's going to be one of the I don't know why here. I don't think it's going to be one of those biggest things because whoever is going to be at quarterback, whether you keep Palmer with his contract now, which I expect them to do so, Palmer's good when you have a power running game. so it frees up the field. Fitzgerald may come back. If he doesn't come back, you're going to see, a lot of more, more guys inside the box actually putting pressure on the court, putting pressure on the run game. So I think doing something, Ellington coming back healthy is going to be key. And on the point of why we didn't see Thomas, I don't know why we did not see Thomas. I mean, Lindley looked terrible. I mean, he was going to start last week, possibly week 17. Arians gave him the opportunity, and then, a day, 2 days later, he lost it. So he must be absolutely doing terrible, or he must have done something really horrible in the locker room to somebody, because he is just not happy whatsoever. I think Thomas has the ability to actually do something, but I don't know why they didn't even include him in the game whatsoever.
And you're talking about Thomas and bringing in the discussion about some of the wide receivers. And Crawford, I'm going to throw this one your way. There have been rumors that Larry Fitzgerald thinks that this might have been his final game with the Arizona Cardinals. They have some emerging young receivers there in Arizona, but how important is it, being a Bengals fan and knowing Carson Palmer's history, how important is it to give Carson Palmer as many receiving threats as possible next year for the Cardinals?
I always thought Carson Palmer did better with more so with possession receivers. I think he likes security blankets. He's the one who likes to utilize the tight ends. And I think that's why T.J. Houshmandzadeh emerged for the Bengals and kind of disappeared after where did he end up going? Seattle?
Yes.
So I know while Carson Palmer was there, he in Arizona, Larry Fitzgerald did go a little underutilized, but I still think he's somebody who has the talent to open up an offense for a quarterback like Carson Palmer, because he's somebody who historically he moves the chains. He gets in trouble when he tries to force the ball downfield sometimes, even though he has the arm for it.
And last question and discussion about the Panthers and Cardinals. Considering the Panthers won, we're spending a lot of time talking about the Cardinals. But Banks, our last question for this game, going to you. Looking at these two teams and where they stand now and going forward, who do you put more worth in when it comes to next season, the Carolina Panthers or the Arizona Cardinals?
I would tend to, assuming that Palmer is healthy, I would go Arizona. I mean, I think it's a push with the defense. Both defenses are very good. At times they've struggled, but they kind of found themselves. I think that's partly due to the coaching. But I would say Arizona, but it will be very interesting to see what kind of weapons they do put around him. I don't think Michael Floyd by himself will be able to get things done. I know he's a very good receiver, but having Larry Fitzgerald there also helps it out a heck of a lot. So it'll be interesting to see if they do lose him, who comes in, who's going to be that other piece for Palmer.
And the second game on Sunday was the AFC. Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the Baltimore Ravens, and a lot of people picking the Pittsburgh Steelers, and not to brag, but I did pick Baltimore. But Baltimore ended up winning 30-17, and we're going to throw this out to Shelby Dermer, assuming he can hear us this time, and maybe I'll talk slower so he can understand what we're saying. But discussing the Steelers and the Ravens, Shelby Dermer, what did you take away with Baltimore's performance traveling into Heinz Field?
Was that to me? I didn't. It was breaking up.
Yes, it was.
We'll try that one more time, Dermer. We were asking your thoughts on the Ravens and Steelers game.
Okay. Well, I think one thing the Ravens were able to do was to get pressure on Roethlisberger going up against the Bengals in Week 17. I think the Bengals didn't even get a quarterback hit on Roethlisberger. He was able to stand clean and real physical with Antonio Brown for most of the game. Brown got loose for that long almost touchdown late in the game. But they were really physical with Brown at the line of scrimmage, and with Haloti Ngata back to step up a run game that was without Le'Veon Bell, the Ravens' defense really came to play and made the Steelers one-dimensional.
And that's what I want to talk about first is that Ravens defense. And it's a defense that has they added Elvis Dumervil last season in a freak accident where the Denver Broncos didn't fax his contract paper in time, so he was a free agent and signed by the Baltimore Ravens, adding 18 sacks this year for the Baltimore Ravens, and they have the ability to get after the quarterback, the best team in the AFC North with that ability, and they put pressure on Ben Roethlisberger all day. Without Le'Veon Bell, Matt Banks, are the Pittsburgh Steelers an elite team?
No, I don't think so. I think that just like Dermer kind of said there, you chop them down and make them one-dimensional like that. The defense certainly isn't what it has been over their, great tenure. I think that, as special as Antonio Brown is, and, Heath Miller, kind of putting his 2 cents in there, doing what he always does, I don't honestly think it gels as well without Le'Veon Bell out of the backfield as a receiver or pounding him in between the tackles. I think he's the key there, and he's the reason for all that balance.
The other thing, and I'll throw this your way, talking about defenses, as good as the Baltimore defense was, even with their makeshift secondary, is it time to finally talk about Troy Polamalu and whether or not his NFL career, as great as it has been, is it coming to an end?
I think it is over. I definitely think we more than likely saw Polamalu's last game. I'll probably also say we also saw James Harrison's last game as well. He didn't look like the elite safety we always saw in the backfield. We kind of saw that in Ed Reed's last year with Baltimore, kind of going downhill, eventually going over. But I definitely thought that Polamalu didn't look like the elite safety we're used to, and that he just looked a step off. I don't know. I know he's been battling injuries the past few years, especially this year. So I definitely think that it's at least considering that he might retire. And for Harrison's sake, he's looked very, very well this year. After last year with Cincinnati, he didn't look great. The system didn't exactly fit him that well. But I think this will probably be Harrison's last game as well.
And looking at the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers, first, Crawford, we look at a young Le'Veon Bell, an aging Ben Roethlisberger, an aging Heath Miller, and a young Antonio Brown. Looking at this team going forward, do you think they are going to be as successful as they were in 2014?
That's a really tough question. It's the same exact feeling I kind of have about the Bengals. They have some young up-and-coming players, but they also are aging in some spots, and you just have to wonder how well they'll be able to perform at the same level and if they have enough to replace what they're kind of starting to lose. That being said, it is a Dick LeBeau run defense, and historically under him, I mean, unless he retires anytime soon, it seems like the Steelers' defense rarely misses a beat. So I would have to bet for Pittsburgh being able to continue, but that being said, they are about to lose some of their keystone players that have been there for the last, decade at least. So.
And we just put up an article from our writer Brandon Burdoin-Lewis about Joe Flacco and his eliteness. Is he playing to the level of his contract? Why is he a better playoff quarterback than a regular season quarterback? And I think he's 10-4 on the road or something along those lines in the playoffs. He has the best record and most wins out of any quarterback in the playoffs on the road since he came into the league. Matt Banks, looking at Joe Flacco, I don't think we'll ever agree, any of us, that he was worth the contract, at least in the regular season. But in terms of playoff production, is Joe Flacco an elite quarterback?
Well, I guess if you chunk it that way, who else does it better? As far as record-wise, if you're just specifically talking about record and getting it done, I don't think you can make that argument. But if you just look at the last regular season weeks, he got dominated by Houston, I believe it was, and then against the Browns, he looked. If you take away the bomb that he had to Torrey Smith, he still had a decent game around 200 and maybe 20 yards, but that 50 yards put him up there. And I don't know. I like you said, nobody really buys him as being an elite guy for the regular season or anything like that, but it's really, really, really tough to argue what the type of production that he gets on a year in and year out basis once they do get to the playoffs.
And last discussion, and hopefully Shelby Dermer can hear us on this one. Looking at the Baltimore running game, Justin Forsett was was in Baltimore and had a great season, giving Gary Kubiak's offense an extra dimension that many didn't think they would have in the running game when Rice was lost, and Bernard Pearson. Who knows what he's done this year as a running back. If you are Ozzie Newsome and the Baltimore Ravens, Shelby, do you bring back Justin Forsett next season?
I think there's no question you have to bring back Forsett. I mean, spent time in Jacksonville, Seattle, and never even came close to the year that he had this year. And with Gary Kubiak, running backs have always really been his specialty. I mean, he kind of coached Arian Foster into what we know as today as to be a all-pro running back. And now with the combo of Forsett and Pierce, then yeah, you have to bring him back.
Looking at the game that many of us are not looking forward to discussing, the 1 p.m. game on Sunday, the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Indianapolis looking to break their 0-forever streak in the playoffs, and they lose 26-10 against the Indianapolis Colts. Before we discuss the Cincinnati Bengals, let's look at the Indianapolis Colts, and in particular, Crawford, I'll start with you. The throw that Andrew Luck made to Monsif in the end zone, on the run, being tackled, is that one of the most impressive throws that you've seen from a quarterback?
Sorry, Banks muttered over some of it.
I was just asking if Andrew Luck's throw to Monsif on the run being tackled was one of the most impressive throws you've seen from a quarterback.
Yeah, no, definitely. What I'm seeing is a quarterback make a play that I have not seen anybody from the Bengals make. As far as it was a special play. That one kind of left me lost for words, and trying to actually explain seeing that was I don't have the words for it. It just was a backbreaker. You could tell the game was pretty much over once that happened. It's a big time play that, I mean, you can see why the Indianapolis Colts were very fortunate to move on from Peyton Manning to find themselves with Andrew Luck.
And looking at the Colts, the two main points of concern for them going into the game was their offensive line. I think it was like their fourth or fifth combination in recent weeks of an offensive line, and a defense that was prone to giving up rushing yards. And for the Bengals, it seemed as though the rushing game was an area that they could excel in here, but it was also an area on defense where they could take advantage of that poor and makeshift offensive line. Taco, how was it so much that the Indianapolis offensive line was that good, or was the Cincinnati defense that poor?
I think it's a combination of both. The Colts' right side has been very questionable all year long, especially with Sheraloos. It really wasn't as great as some people believed it to be. It looked amazing on Sunday because the Bengals couldn't even touch Andrew Luck with anything. They could get a 10-foot stick and wouldn't be anywhere near him, so it was pretty bad. I think definitely we're feeling the effects of losing Michael Johnson. On that other side, being able to get to the ball carrier, get to the quarterback. Last year he may not have had enough sacks, but he was there enough times that Dunlap was able to get in, Atkins was able to get in. Somebody was able to get to the quarterback every single time. Johnson had a lot to do with that. With only one real threat the entire season in Dunlap, they could pretty much just throw a tight end or your best guy on that side, and Dunlap would be a non-factor. The quarterback would be, having a clean jersey the entire time. So I think it was definitely an effect of both of them, but definitely shifted more towards Cincinnati having zero pass rush whatsoever.
And let's keep the discussion there and talk about that Cincinnati pass rush, which hasn't been there all season. Now, just twice in Marvin Lewis's tenure with the Bengals have they finished with less than 20 or fewer sacks, one of them being this season. Taco, you referred to Carlos Dunlap and being the only real pass rusher on the season. Geno Atkins has been a shell of himself. Banks, I'll throw this out to you here. if you are the Bengals, they have never really been big players in free agency. Do you try to build through the draft? And I know, Taco, you got a mock draft coming up, so I'll get your opinion on this in a minute too. But Banks, do you look to build through the draft, or a team with nearly $40 million in cap space, do you take a risk and a chance going out to grab a free agent like someone, per se, and Ndamukong Suh?
That's a good question. I think it would depend on, with Sue, is it just a change in scenery that he needs? Is this the guy that's just going to be a torment wherever he's going to be? Or is this the guy who's going to get paid and pull an Albert Hainsworth and not be anywhere close to himself? I don't know. I think maybe they do a little bit of both, as far as maybe they bring in a guy through free agency to be a starter and then kind of back him up through the draft with some younger talent. But I think maybe not so much as finding a new guy to do it. I think maybe it's just getting those guys that have proven themselves in the past, whatever level that is, just get them back there. Because, like you said, I mean, you guys have people like Gilberry and as you said, Dunlap, Geno Atkins. Obviously, that talent's there. I think it's just getting them back to that level, if that's possible. I think the talent is there through most of that line. Now, Michael Johnson was a big part of that, but you got other guys, causing chaos up front. So, your guess is as good as mine. But I think the pieces are there. Maybe just one guy, maybe off the edge to kind of help him.
And Crawford, looking at who the Bengals have to choose from, they still, for some reason unknown to me, have Robert Geathers starting on the defensive line, making $3.5 million and contributing as much as I have on the season. You also have Domata Peko, who I love and has been on the team for years and been a great leader and very productive, but he is doing nothing. So on the entire right side of the defense, or left side of the defensive line, you've got Robert Geathers and Domata Peko eating up almost $8 million in salary and doing nothing for the team. Do you, in your opinion, look for outside help in free agency to try and shore up a very thin defensive line?
That would be my preference. I know Sue has a habit for being a little bit of a quote-unquote dirty player, but there was a lot of attitude lacking from the Bengals defense this season, and I don't know how much changing supporting cast could help. I think a lot of it is kind of a residual effect from losing Zimmer as a coordinator, more so than anything. That and maybe a couple injuries from losing Burfict. But, I mean, yeah, I agree. I love Peko too, but he's better at fullback in goal line situations than he is as a defensive tackle. Gathers, yeah, I kind of forgot Gathers was on the team for a while. That's not even a joke. I seriously forgot he was on the team. But while the D-line needs to be addressed too, I don't know how long you can count on having Burfict being a viable option to stay healthy, and that's even before losing Malaluga, who's also been a little bit of a liability. I wouldn't mind addressing through free agency either a defensive tackle or in the draft, or also looking more into the linebacker situation, because the defense has the talent. You just need a couple more pieces, and I think to be back to where it was or where it has been in the previous couple of years. But it's also on the verge, I think, of just collapsing.
And Taco, we'll round out the defensive line discussion with you before we go into the hot red-headed topic of the day. But looking at that defensive line, and Banks and Crawford have talked about some potential possibilities. Two questions for you, if you can address them both briefly. One, who, if you would go through the draft or the free agency, who would you go after for the defensive line? And two, looking at the draft, do the Bengals need to spend their first two, possibly three picks on the defensive side, addressing the defensive line, linebackers, and the aging secondary?
Well, I think with the first question, I would consider going both draft and free agency. If it was up to me, I would really love it, which is not going to happen, but I would love to see Mike Brown actually spend the money and go after maybe like a Jason Pierre-Paul because he's going to be a free agent. It's a lot of money, but guess what? We have like $40 million in cap room. He'd be great on that side, right across from Dunlap. Both edges getting in there. That'd be awesome. Never going to happen because he's not going to spend that money. But hey, I like to dream. So I would love to see that happen. More than likely, he might get after a small bit player. Gathers is still going to be on the team, eating up all that money. Pecco's still on the team, eating up all that money. It's what's going to happen, unfortunately. I would love to dream a lot, but it's unfortunately what's going to happen. We'll probably go through the draft. My mock draft will be coming out in the next few days, and I've got us looking at Alvin Dupree right now out of Kentucky. He's just a pass rusher. That's a pure fact. That's all he does. He just gets to the quarterback, he gets him, he knocks him down, he goes back to the line and starts over again. His run-stopping game is kind of questionable, which we really needed that. I would expect us in the second round or third round to look at another defensive tackle, but I say in 2 of our first 3 picks for this upcoming year, I'm going to say you're going to be looking at defense. Linebacker is going to be a question mark, but I think we're going to be okay. Burfict hasn't really had much of an injury bug throughout his entire career prior to this season. The concussions are really going to be questioning. He had a lot of concussions this year, a lot of problems with that. So it's really going to be hurting him what happens in there. Same with Maluga. Maluga is always injured, but Vincent Ray has shown that he can fill in immediately, which thankfully he's still on the team. And then Lemur, he actually showed himself up this year. I was actually really surprised. He was one of those guys that I was kind of keeping an eye on, and he took the starting job and he kind of held on to it. Didn't really make too many flashy plays. He got beaten a couple times, but he made plays when he needed to make some plays. So overall, I'm happy with him. But yeah, I definitely see 2 of our first 3 picks, defense, front 7, and Mike Brown won't do anything flashy in free agency. I would love to see him go after Sue or Pierre-Paul or both, but it won't happen.
Switching gears to the Cincinnati offense, before talking about Dalton, I want to touch on A.J. Green. Free agent after the year, obviously the Bengals will use their franchise tag on him. Banks, if you're A.J. Green and you're looking at this organization and you realize you could be in for the long haul with Andy Dalton as your quarterback, do you think he looks at this and says, he can stunt my growth and keep me from being the best in the game? If he does it that way, if you're A.J. Green, do you look at possibly not re-signing with the Bengals and choosing to go elsewhere in free agency?
Sure. I mean, I think I'm getting to the point where I just kind of had this conversation with a friend yesterday. I don't know how much of it was not having some help on the other side or when A.J. Green is out, but Dalton just looks bad, and I've tried to defend him, and I can't anymore. So I definitely think that he looks at that and says, all right, is this the guy that I want to be around? Because he's, as we can see with the concussions and the soft tissue injuries that he has, if he's not on the field, he's not the most durable guy that we're talking about. So do you want to use your prime years with Andy Dalton, or would you like to test the market with somebody else? I really think that's something that deserves that he's going to take a look at. But like you said, I don't know if he'd be that guy if they tagged him, if he'd hold out, or if he'd throw one of those things at the team. But I definitely agree that it would get a look.
And speaking of Andy Dalton and Crawford, I'll throw this one over to you. I know that he's not your favorite person, and I try to play devil's advocate with you quite often because I stand up for Dalton, even when I don't necessarily agree with it, just to piss you off. But looking at Dalton,
you do that.
looking at Dalton next year, is that, since the Bengals do have an out after next year in his contract, is next season truly the make or break in Andy Dalton's career with the Bengals? And if so, what does he need to do in order for the Bengals to keep him going forward?
You broke up a little bit towards the end, but I'll start off. Yeah, I mean, next year is definitely a make or break season for him. I don't even think for his career with the Bengals. I think for his career. I don't know if he kind of falters towards the end of next year or doesn't make the playoffs or falls flat on his face again in the playoffs. I don't know who's going to be interested in him, really. I mean, I think anybody after 4 years can look at what he's done and chalk it up to it being a byproduct of who's been around him this whole entire season. Sure, there were some injuries to A.J. Green and Jermaine Gresham along the way. Jermaine Gresham, by the way, is somebody who the Bengals are probably, I would hope, would let go too. But he's been somebody who's been supplied with an embarrassment of riches and weapons on the offensive side. There was a little bit of a lack of a running game, and lo and behold, Jeremy Hill emerges, and he looks like he's the next superstar, kind of almost. I mean, the next superstar running back, I would say. I mean, he's looked very impressive. AJ Green, I almost have thought AJ Green has been a detriment to the offense for the fact, at least with Andy Dalton at the helm, because I always thought Andy Dalton just got kind of lazy when he was in the game and just kind of chucked it up to him. But he was just too much of a security blanket. Andy Dalton, to me, is, and a year and a half ago, the beginning of his third season, I was standing up for him. I thought, he got the Bengals to the playoffs 2 times in a row. And I could have chalked up some of his struggles to growing pains, but it's the end of year 4. And the best thing I can say about his performance yesterday, and granted, there was some dropped balls. The slot receiver was Rex Burkhead. The best thing I can say Andy Dalton did was he didn't throw an interception. That's literally the best thing I can say about his performance yesterday. There's just also things he does that infuriates me. He's in the fourth quarter down by 17 points for the second time in the playoffs in 2 years. And he gives himself up. He takes a slide 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Like, what is he doing? He feels like he doesn't have anything to prove at all. Apparently, I don't know, but that's the impression I get. So yeah, I mean, I think it's his make or break year, essentially. And I think he's out of the league if he doesn't perform.
And Taco, last question on the Bengals. Looking at next season, a lot of people, obviously in the aftermath of the Bengals loss, calling for the jobs of Marvin Lewis and Andy Dalton. Is not going to happen. Either one. Looking at Marvin Lewis, 1 year left on his contract, what does he need to do and or accomplish to keep his job after this season?
Honestly, I think if he makes the playoffs, he'll be fine. Mike Brown, I believe, lives in mediocrity at this point, and I think he'll be just fine doing nothing, absolutely nothing with what he has. Marvin Lewis is a good coach. A lot of people want to just trash him and throw him away, but look at where we were at before Marvin Lewis came. Yeah, we've had some ups and downs with him, but we've been pretty consistent throughout. I definitely think next year is Dalton's final year. That he has to go up or put up or shut up next year above anything else. It's really going to be rough for me to honestly believe that Dalton can be the guy. We saw that again without his security blanket of AJ Green. He just wasn't able to do anything. Yeah, you were demolished, by injuries, and you didn't even have Eifert most of the year. Marvin Jones was gone. You lost Gresham for a few games, but I definitely think it showed that Andy Dalton can't do much, without his number one receiver. I think AJ Green definitely helped him get a lot of that contract, and without him, we see that he isn't worth that much of it. So I think Marvin will be just fine. If they make the playoffs, I think his job will be safe. And unfortunately, if they make the playoffs, I think Andy Dalton might be safe as well, whether I want it to be or not.
And looking at the final game from the NFL wildcard weekend, it was a game that probably caused Banks' heart to skip a couple beats. And his money,
a couple times. Yeah.
And his money was well spent paying the officials for a nice call. Banks, I'll go ahead and throw it your way first. That call, let me rephrase that. That non-call, was that right to pick up the flag?
No, it wasn't right to pick up the flag. His explanation of it, as far as being able to face guard and things like that, you don't pick up the flag and then say no flag. You either call it or you don't. I I was watching it with a buddy of mine who was a Lions fan, and he lost it. I mean, he went absolutely insane, and I was right there with him. I'm like, that's, if it wasn't my team, that's just a ridiculous call. The fact that Hitchens held Pettigrew prior to that, and I think one of the bigger things is that Pettigrew also grabbed Hitchens' face mask, which may or may not be the reason that he couldn't get his head around to play the ball. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a referee. Why couldn't they offset those penalties and replay the down? Maybe that's not possible, but I think the Lions definitely did get jobbed on that one, and if nothing else, it may not have been pass interference in their opinion, but there was definitely a hold before they even got to that point.
And Taco, looking at the Dallas Cowboys and Detroit Lions game, Dallas now traveling to Green Bay. I actually have Dallas winning in the frozen tundra. You're welcome, Banks. But Taco, looking at this game, can the Cowboys against a far less superior? I'm gonna try that sentence again. The Cowboys against a defense that is much inferior to that of the Detroit Lions. Do you expect the Cowboys to come out on top at Lambeau Field?
I think the big thing is that if Murray's hand is okay, you need to run the ball with him as much as possible and just keep on running. Green Bay's defense has been shown to be their weakness, especially their run defense. I think if Murray can start getting into a rhythm, just bump it off 4, 8, 4, big run, here and there. If he can start busting those out, that's really going to help out those passing lanes for Tony Romo that he needs. I think the big matchup is going to be, Romo against that secondary. I think, and especially dealing with the pass rush with Clay Matthews and Julius Peppers as well. I think Dallas has a chance in this. I think this is a lot closer of a game than people actually realize. If I was a betting man, which I am, my money would be on Green Bay, but I definitely think that Dallas does have a fighting chance in it.
All right, Banks, you got two of us who are jumping on your Cowboys bandwagon. What are your thoughts on their trip to Green Bay?
Oh, I completely agree with Taco there. I think it's just it's a control. The best defense for Aaron Rodgers is to keep him off the field. I mean, I would not want Brandon Carr back there on Jordy Nelson or Randall Cobb. I think Skandrick will be a big player in this game if he is on, let's say he's on Cobb because he's a lot of the time in the slot. I think that's a big matchup to watch. I think on the other side, you're probably going to see a lot more Cole Beasley. All 5'8", 102 pounds of him. I think you're going to see him a lot more. If it is interesting if they do start to get a heavy rush on Romo, what they're going to do with Witten. Are they going to leave him in more of a full package and kind of chip or block in the backfield? That'll be interesting to see what they do with him there. But also, obviously you would like to have Murray there, and he's a gigantic factor. But I think the offensive line will be able to handle themselves a little bit more aggressively here, as with the front line of Detroit, they weren't able to do that quite as well. But even Joseph Randle, when he's been put in there, he's even busted a few runs. So, putting the guys back there and really getting that push up there, you're right. It's not about the 60-yard touchdown. It's about the kind of like Barry Sanders used to do, the 4 yards, 2 yards here, maybe a -1, and then a 21-yard burst. It's all about chipping away, and they've done a great job. This isn't the Cowboys of the past. It's of the past 3 years. Sorry. It's the they're really sticking with the run. They're not just saying, oh, well, we ran it 8 times in the first half and we got 26 yards. Why don't we just throw the rest of the time? They're really sticking with it, and I think that's really going to bode well for them in this game. Now, will they win it? Oh, my gosh, I hope so, but let's pump the brakes on that. I'm not going to jump to conclusions there, but I do think they have a really, really good shot. Also 8-0 on the road this year.
Thanks for adding that right back in there, Banks. I had clicked over back to my video, and there's now an awkward millisecond of me just staring blankly at the camera while you throw in your last road stat right there. And before we end our NFL Wildcard Playoff edition of the Sports Grumble podcast broadcast, Taco, I'm going to throw it over to you. What do you expect out of this game from Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, briefly?
I definitely think that Aaron Rodgers is going to really tear into that secondary. Skandrick is going to have to be on his best. Carr is going to be subpar like usual. I definitely think that DeMarcus Lawrence is going to have to get the quarterback. That whole defense is going to have to try to just put pressure on Rodgers the entire day, which is really going to hurt them because then that's also going to open up some lanes in the middle for Lacy to just cut in and out and just take care of everybody. I definitely think that I know for a fact I've completely underrated the Dallas defense the entire year. I thought that was going to be, the Achilles heel in the entire year. I thought that was going to be the killer. And yet time and time again, at the end of the Detroit game, what happens? Lawrence, makes a fumble. And of course, he lost it, but then what's he do a few plays later? He does it again, and he takes it right back. So their defense is definitely winning them their games, even though their offense is getting them in these positions. So I really want to say Green Bay, but that Dallas defense just keeps surprising me. So hopefully I get surprised, but I definitely think that Aaron Rodgers is going to dice up that defense.
Well, Banks, don't let your ego get too big since everybody here is picking the Dallas Cowboys for you. But that'll do it for the NFL Wildcard edition of our Grumblecast podcast broadcast from Sports Grumble. It seems just weird without Chen here to put an extra spin on it. But we will step aside, and we will be back here in a few minutes to share another one with you surrounding college football and the upcoming inaugural national championship. So if you haven't already, check out sportsgrumble.com. Click on the podcast link at the top, or if you are on SoundCloud, just search Sports Grumble. Thanks for checking us out.